you constantly have to choose one side or the other. Whereas in the church and in our communities, there should really be a genuine freedom of the spirit to open yourself to what is good and true and beautiful. And that's going to manifest itself in different ways in different people.
When our political culture becomes toxic and our political parties force us to choose sides, how can Catholics rise above partisanship and live the Catholic values and teachings that unite us? That's a question I discussed with Archbishop William Lori. Archbishop Lori is the Archbishop of Baltimore, the chaplain to the Knights of Columbus, and the author of the 2026 pastoral letter on the occasion of the 250th anniversary of the United States, entitled In Charity and Truth, Toward a Renewed Political Culture. Archbishop Lori, welcome to the Communion Project podcast.
For those who don't know you as personally, can you tell us a bit about where you grew up and maybe an experience of your faith growing up that's shaped who you are today?
Well, I'm 75 years old. I was born in Louisville, but grew up in southern Indiana. And it was a family. I had three brothers. My mom and dad lived to a ripe old age. Mom lived to be 103. Dad till he was 99. And one of the big things I learned from mom and dad that really shaped my faith is that my older brother, Frankie, had special needs. And the beautiful love that they showed to my brother, and it was truly sacrificial love, to the end of his life, and they were in their 90s when he died, really taught me a lot about relying on God, on commitment, on vocation, and what it means to persevere. So mom and dad truly were my teachers in the ways of faith.
That resonates so much. Both my parents have siblings with special needs. And I see so clearly how that formed a real dignity of the human person and a vision to that, even though my parents or others might not use that language to describe it.
Yes. Yeah, mine would not have used that language either, but that's what they did, for sure.
Yeah, what a great foundation and a gift that people with different abilities offer the rest of the church and the rest of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
The podcast is called The Communion Project, with the double meaning of the Eucharistic sense of communion, but also the sense of communion or right relationship with one another. And I love that early church phrase of kind of become what you receive. Mm-hmm. That idea of being, Eucharistic people and being a people of communion. But connecting it back to the Eucharist, as you think about your life and so many daily masses and Sunday masses, and as bishop, a priest, but also as a layperson, is there a meaningful experience of Mass that really stands out to you?
Oh, many, but I'll cite two. One was when I was a kid, and my mom took me to a first Mass at a parish, St. Mary's in New Albany, Indiana. I don't remember the name of the priest, but I remember it was a solemn Mass. It was the old rite, paying rapt attention as this newly ordained priest said his first Mass. And I remember saying to Mom, I was like in the second or third grade, that was really beautiful. And that's one. Another one, I've been at all kinds of big liturgies and things, but one was when I was a bishop of Bridgeport, and we had a shelter. And one Christmas, I said Mass in the shelter, and I had a little scola, and I had a nice little congregation. And at the end of the Mass, one of the folks who was there looked me in the eye and he said, "Could we sing Jingle Bells?" And I said, "Of course we can sing Jingle Bells." It was a Christmas moment that really made me feel close to Christ in his poverty.
I didn't have Jingle Bells in a detention center on my bingo card for our conversation, but that's the mystery of creation for you.
It is. It is. It is. Who knew? Who knew?
Right. Exactly. And how beautiful, for as many papal masses as you've been to and masses that you've celebrated as Archbishop, that, it's much more of those Bethlehem style experiences that you name. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. If there is another one, it's this past year, I was able to go to the Holy Land and, of course, say Mass at the empty tomb.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, of course, nothing quite compares with that either. And there were not many people there, so I could stay as long as I really wanted. And that was a hugely memorable experience too. So the Lord has been so good to me, enabling me to have just innumerable wonderful experiences.
Yeah, what a gift. And a gift to see how, holiness can really sanctify a place. In your pastoral letter you released this year, titled "In Charity and Truth Toward a Renewed Political Culture," you described kind of the atmosphere, not so much that's of a sacred land or sacred ground, but the reality of brokenness in this country that you described even as like a polluted or toxic kind of environment at times. Why do you think that public discourse in our local communities and even family life has become so divisive today in our country?
I think there's a lot of reasons why rhetoric is out of control and there's great polarization and vitriol. I think the main reason, the central reason, is a kind of collective amnesia, a forgetfulness that each of us is made in God's image, that each of us is a person endowed with dignity, or as we like to say in the Declaration of Independence, with unalienable rights. I think that in many ways, the way we consume information in ways that are designed to inflame us and opinionate us has caused us to reduce other people to positions that we may or may not agree with, or people who are either going to be in our tribe and agree with us, or people who have to be defeated in some way. Another reason, I think, is that it's in families that we learn to encounter one another, to talk through our differences. I think that the disappearance of the family meal at night has done an awful lot to do this. If I could add two more things, it might be that people no longer really know their faith as they did before, or as they should. And also they don't know much about our country, about its history, about how it was set up. They know about its flaws, but they don't know about its goodness and its potential. Those would be some of the reasons I would cite.
No, I love those. That's a great list. Yeah, I just, when you say family meal, I just immediately go back to my childhood table. I'm the youngest of three older brothers, and it could be a dynamic table experience. But you're right that there were a lot of lessons learned at that table.
There were, and sometimes it was at a family meal that you learn from your parents, and sometimes your parents learn from their kids, kind of how to work it out, how to even disagree, but love nonetheless. And sometimes, of course, mom would say, go work it out with your brother and don't come back till you have. But those were important things.
That's right.
And if you don't learn it at home, and if you don't learn it in school, where are you going to learn it? And
right.
I'm sure it's being learned today as it should be.
That's right. One of the things we talk about is how the Catholic Church has this great opportunity to be a thermostat, not just a thermometer. That we should be setting the temperature of the room in our country instead of just adjusting ourselves like a thermostat or reading the temperature of a room. And unfortunately, I'm not sure we're being much of a thermostat. I think we're more commonly using the tools of the culture for better or for worse. Where do you see polarization showing up within the church, whether at a parish level or even among leaders?
Sure, it's there. The people who are part of our parish families breathe in this toxic air and they reflect it. Sometimes when you preach on a social issue, you can tell who watches CNN, who watches Fox, who watches Newsmax, who watches MSNBC, or who listens to what podcast. You can sort of tell that. But that's in a way okay, because the job of the church is to bring people in and to transform them through word and sacrament. I think that Pope Francis spoke so beautifully in Evangelii Gaudium about creating the culture of encounter, where parishioners can come to know and like each other, maybe even love each other, even though they might be on opposite sides of the political divide. Communion does not mean uniformity. It does mean that we have gifts that differ, we have views that differ, and there is certainly a legitimate diversity. But building communion in a parish means you bring this together, you listen, you invite parishioners to listen to one another. You get them to slow down before they speak. You pray together. You talk about a higher truth that maybe they haven't thought of, flowing directly from the gospel and being distilled into Catholic social teaching. That's how our parishes and dioceses can become, if you will, a sacrament of that unity we would like to foster in the broader culture.
Yeah. We hosted a luncheon at the November meeting, bishops' meetings, with a number of bishops, which was a real joy. And one of the things that came up with everyone is the challenges, both with lay leaders, but also with clergy, and the polarization that exists within brother priests, presbyterates. What's the formation? How do you think about that as a bishop in leading a community that has these divisions? Not even Fox News versus CNN, but even within our own Catholic topics and priorities.
Yeah. Again, I think that it's nothing new. I live in a house, the first bishop's house in the United States. And in my house, there was Gibbons and John Ireland, who were thought to be somewhat on the left. And then you had Bernard McQuaid of Rochester and others who would have had very different ideas about how the church ought to relate to the culture. And those were very real divisions, but there was an underlying sense of mission that the church had to grow as the United States grew and expanded westward, that we had to have schools, that we had to have charities, that we had to engage the immigrants that were pouring into our country at the time. I think really for all of us, whether we are members of the laity in lay leadership or whether we are clergy who are in leadership, I think it's the focus on the person of Christ and on the mission, and it's allowing our faith to reset how we think and how we relate. At base, it's about a relationship with God through Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, and flowing from that, our relationship with one another. Pastors, bishops, lay ecclesial leaders, we are fundamentally builders of relationship, not just ordinary secular relationships, but relationships that are suffused with faith and with a magnanimity that we find lacking in our culture. And so, for example, if I could just say this, sometimes I read in the paper, and this doesn't help things, in the media, that we bishops are just so divided that whenever we get together for a general assembly, it's a food fight. It's not. We certainly have our differences. But if in the broader culture we dealt with our differences the way we bishops do, we would say the era of good feelings had returned because we actually like each other. And I think we have an underlying sense of mission. In my own diocese, as we have blessed with a lot of vocations, but as they're coming through the seminary, I make sure that they get to know the presbyterate, and the presbyterate gets to know them as persons, not as a category, not as a problem to be solved, but as persons. And nothing's ever perfect, but when I have a convocation of priests, it does my old heart good to see the older guys and the younger guys at the same table, sharing stories, having a good time, and enjoying one another's company. Then, when a problem comes up, there's a lot more of a chance that we're going to work through it and have conversations of the Holy Spirit and move forward with mission, which is the only reason we're here.
Yeah, I love that focus on mission and how it can be such a unifying dimension. When I was getting married in our marriage prep, someone along the line said that the best things for a marriage are either shared enemies or shared goals. And it's so true that if you're striving for something or you're fighting against something together, your posture changes from maybe fighting with each other or facing away from each other to facing in the same direction.
Yeah. So do I want my party in the church to win, my tribe to win? Or do I want to help Christ in the victory of life and grace over sin and death? If that's really what we're head over heels about, okay. Everything else ought to be a minor deal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the things you write about in your pastoral letter is the opportunity for more and more Catholics to really place that Catholic identity at the heart of how we live. You say many of our people instinctively identify as Americans or as Democrats or Republicans before they identify as Catholics. And in those cases, the gospel is easily overshadowed by partisanship or even a rigid ideology that demands more loyalty than the Word of God itself. So how do leaders, or how do you think about how we help people kind of unlearn the unhealthy dimensions of partisanship, even as we hope that people are publicly and politically engaged?
No doubt it's a tall order, and probably is not going to be done by issuing a pastoral letter, ironically enough. I think, though, it does come from, I think, the practice of synodality at the parish level. I was a delegate to the synod. I was there the whole month, every day at a little round table, talking to folks. It was exhausting. It was
An introvert's
absolutely
nightmare, it sounds like. But
yeah, for sure. And by the third week, we were all begging for relief. And I understand it's not the easy way; it's the difficult way.
Yeah.
But it's when you get people to listen to each other finally, to encounter the other, to start listening for what's good in the position of a person they disagree with, to pray together, also to bring to bear on the divisions of our culture what Pope Leo has so beautifully brought just in these recent days to bear on the subject of technology, a sense of human dignity and the common good. And what are the ways in which we can work together to attain that? I think that's what pastoral leadership is. If you're simply doing the same thing and if you're engaging, I say somewhere else in the pastoral, part of the problem is the culture of avoidance, where we leaders sometimes say, I can't talk about that because it will be instant death in the narthex when Mass is over. But I think while you do get criticism when you engage a controversial topic, at the end of the day, the people who come to Mass on Sunday are adults. And I think when something is presented respectfully and through the lens of the Church's social teaching and moral teaching, combined with God's grace flowing through the sacraments, you might get a better response.
That's right.
But you have to think it through and pray it through.
That's right. And so you mentioned synodality. So many of the skills that are needed to do that are kind of held within this treasure of synodal practice. And so while speaking on a public issue that you might get reamed from half the congregation, if you have practiced with your community the skills of listening and dialogue and prayerful discernment with some time before engaging and speaking, I find those conversations go a heck of a lot better, don't you?
I do too. One of the things we've done here is to recast our pastoral councils in parishes in a synodal mode. We've introduced it into the presbyteral council. And I've sort of said to, shared with my pastors that maybe having a town hall meeting is not always the right way to go. You know, it looks like it's far better to invite people over, have them sit together in small groups, talk things through, have a facilitator, and have people finally listen to each other. It's a leap, but I think it's worth doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. All the better if there's food.
Yeah, food makes everything work. I don't care what it is. Food makes everything work better.
That's exactly right. When you talk about synodality and the gift it is to the church, one of the things that you speak to is the reality of unity and diversity. And in Pope Leo's encyclical, he talks about the images of the city of Babel and the city of Jerusalem, and this idea of uniformity in the city of Babel versus communion of unity and diversity in the city of Jerusalem. Could you explain what we mean by unity and diversity and why they're valuable or needed in our Catholic community?
I think one of the challenges with social media especially is that it attacks your individuality. If you're a little different, if you're not quite conforming, you get bullied, you get pummeled, you get shamed, and that's not good. Or you constantly have to choose one side or the other. Whereas in the church and in our communities, there should really be a genuine freedom of the spirit to open yourself to what is good and true and beautiful. And that's going to manifest itself in different ways in different people. I've been doing scads of confirmations, and how many times have I heard this spring, there are a variety of gifts, but one spirit. It's true. And the church needs all of those gifts. There is a legitimate theological diversity, different schools of thought that are not necessarily opposed to each other, but can be complementary. There are illegitimate forms of diversity too, and those, in a synodal way, should be discerned. I don't think taking a Gatling gun to these things ever helps, but prayerful discernment sometimes in the Holy Spirit brings to the fore what is the real value, what is the real truth here, what is of great importance. And so I think that's the kind of thing that is the church should be modeling for the wider community. Now, I'm not sure I'll live to see the day, when the oversight committee of the House of Representatives has a synodal session and they call in the chaplain. I don't think I'll be seeing that. But it used to be that you could have people from different parties with very different points of view who could disagree. And politics always has been a blood sport, let's face it. But when it was over, they trade stories, they go out to dinner. There was an underlying friendship, a civic friendship. And in that civic friendship, ultimately, there would be some sort of a compromise that would move us beyond paralysis. Not seeing it right now. I think the church, as you say, as a thermostat, one of the things we could help to do is to lower the temperature just a little bit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What would it look like to you for Catholics in the United States to more seriously live communion, this unity and diversity with one another? Like, if you dream for a second, what could that impact be?
First of all, I think out of the culture, there is an immense hunger for belonging, for communion, to be known, to be understood, to be listened to. In parishes that are truly welcoming, and it's more than having a greeter at the door or singing all are welcome. Those are okay and all, but really when you walk into a church,
You
you
feel
can
it.
tell is it an open community or is it a closed? In some places, you have like boutique parishes where we're this kind of Catholic, and if you think like us, you're welcome to be here. And that shows no ideological favorites. That can be across the spectrum.
Yeah.
When you go into a kind of just a wonderful open meat and potatoes parish, people of all ages, and the parishioners, let alone the pastor, is really glad to see you and is interested in you. I think that people are attracted to that. And the more we build communities of encounter, I think the more our mission is going to succeed. We're seeing it. I mean, we had 2,000 people come into the church in Baltimore at Easter. And a lot of it is because a big swath of our parishes are really trying hard to do this. And they're doing it in different ways. They don't all look the same. But I think that this is a beautiful thing. And as we build these communities, I think the church becomes what I like to call a light brightly visible. I wrote 3 pastorals with that name, with that same title. and I've been accused of having a singular lack of imagination. But I think that's what the church ought to be. It ought to be a life that's bright and attractive, but also warm and welcoming.
Yeah, well said. As we zoom into our particular U.S. context, I'm inspired by you. In your pastoral letter, you mention the stories of so many different saints and holy witnesses, many, from Baltimore and certainly moved through that colonial city. Uh, Servant of God, Father Isaac Hecker, was the founder of the Paulist Fathers, American citizen, lived in New York, but he famously said that he was a better American because he was Catholic and a better Catholic because he was American. He kind of uniquely believed in both of these institutions as being mutually beneficial to one another, and that America was a prime place for Catholic evangelization. What do you think our Catholic tradition has to offer the United States in this 250th year?
Well, first of all, let me say that Isaac Hecker's view will find great support in the thought of Archbishop John Carroll, who understood this at the very outset of the Archdiocese of Baltimore in 1789 and at the very outset of our republic. He found very visible and vocal support in Cardinal Gibbons, and because Cardinal Gibbons also, when he received the red hat, preached a homily in Santa Maria in Trastevere, really echoed that very same sentiment. And why? Because Gibbons and Hecker and that whole generation could see how the church was contributing to the upbuilding of the United States. As immigrants poured into our country, they were building our country. They were building families, schools, factories, bridges, roads, skyscrapers. They could see that the church was making an immense contribution to the upbuilding of the country. And they appreciated the opportunity to have religious freedom, to take these immigrants in, to form them, help them, get them started. But they also understood that they were making a great contribution, very practical contribution to the life of the country. I think today, the contribution that we can make is really twofold. Number one, creating a place where people can come together, know one another, experience loving and being loved, serving and being served. And number two, a place where there's formation for virtue. People don't talk about that much. I do in my pastoral letter about the 4 cardinal virtues. We need to see them in our leaders, but we're not going to see them in our leaders till they are evident in us. And that's one of the things we can contribute to our country, formation in virtue. And by that, I don't mean just grin and bear it. I mean the formation in virtue that comes from falling deeply in love with Christ, becoming a part of his people, and wanting to live and love as the Lord did. And the virtues really just guide us how to do this. So I think we can make a huge contribution. I think also about our schools, the formation that can go on in a Catholic school, Catholic high school, in campus ministry. What we really are doing is what we did from the beginning, is raising up new generations of women and men that can be exemplary citizens.
I love the connection to sort of the American history. And I think it's a great point in this 250th year, a little bit of study on U.S. Catholic history would bring a lot of resonance to our current moment.
Sure would.
Yeah, we're divided now, but It's not as though U.S. American history or Catholic history is full of easefulness in our country.
It really is. But, the important thing is they never let it impede the mission. Of course, there were actual divisions. There were breakoffs from the Catholic Church. I think of the Polish National Church, for example. And there were times when priests famously left the reservation. I'm thinking about Father Glenn up in New York, for example. That's true. But it's always, the Lord told us it would always be that way.
That's
the
right.
important thing is that when it was all said and done, Gibbons, Ireland, McQuaid, they all knew they were members of the same church and had the same Lord. And it was fundamentally the same mission.
I think about that so too with the charisms in the life of the church. That, Elizabeth Ann Seton is not Isaac Hecker, is not Pierre Toussaint, is not, each one of them were so distinctive. And that if you asked Elizabeth Ann Seton to try to be an Isaac Hecker or be someone else, they'd be terrible at it and probably very unjoyful, right? Because they lived their own vocation in their own particular way.
Sure. John Paul II in Redemptor Hominis refers to our human dignity and to each person as an unrepeatable reality. And the Lord does not ask us to pretend to be somebody else. He wants to suffuse us with the grace of the Holy Spirit, not only to make us the best version of ourselves, but to give us these gifts and charisms that harmoniously build up the body of Christ. So my, as the chaplain of the Knights of Columbus, I look at Father McGivney, 19th century parish priest, at a time when Catholics were not too well thought of. But what he did is he brought his Catholic community together, started the Knights based on charity, unity, fraternity, and he extended the reach of the church into the community, the broader community, broke down some of the barriers, some of the hostility. And I look at him and said, we think it's hard now, but it was hard then. The only reason we think it was easier then is because we weren't living then.
Right. And thankfully, they didn't have social media recording every 10 seconds of their lives.
They didn't, but they had the New Haven Register. What can I tell you?
You mentioned Father McGivney and this idea of unity as a dimension of the Knights. How does that express itself as a principle of the work of the Knights of Columbus?
I think that the Knights express their unity, first of all, by coming together, meeting, being with each other, enjoying one another's company. It's built on fraternity and friendship, but also on the charity we do together. And the Knights do tremendous amount of charity. It's a unity that's also for sure based on faith, and we do a lot of faith formation, especially with the younger demographic that we're now attracting. We had 100,000 new Knights last year, and many of them, the majority, from the United States and Canada. These are younger guys. They're looking for something where they can have faith formation, a way of serving, and good companionship. And I think the principles of unity and fraternity really serve very well the pastoral needs of a lot of guys and their families. Not just a men's organization, it's a family organization.
Yeah, it's so striking that for so long, we had this tradition of these confraternities and these associations of the faithful especially in the pre-conciliary years.
Mm-hmm.
And as people, Robert Putnam and others have so famously talked about, in the book Bowling Alone and others, that we just have this broader social disengagement now. But
We do.
there aren't as many knights or elk lodges or bowling groups,
Yeah.
but there's beginning to be a bit of revitalization. We've almost gone too far in the pendulum in isolation and digitalization of our lives, that people are hungry for just what you're describing, a culture of encounter.
So Father McGivney understood in the 19th century the hold of secret societies on especially immigrants who were in a new country, having a tough time, looking for some form of companionship and support. He understood secret societies demanded a false loyalty. So in his genius, he creates the Knights as a place where you could have the same kind of unity and friendship and companionship based on faith, based on doing good for others, based on helping one another when tragedy strikes, which is the origin of our insurance program. Today, the Knights have remained strong all these years. It never underwent a decline like many other fraternal organizations, I must say. But it's experiencing now a resurgence in growth, I think precisely because of the isolation and loneliness that is epidemic in our culture.
So, Archbishop, as we think about this work of building communion and unity and fraternity, what's a resource or a practice that you'd recommend Catholics commit to if they want to be a part of this work of building communion in the U.S. Catholic Church?
Well, in my pastoral letter, I have a whole bunch of stuff you could do, but I'm going to suggest just one here. And that is to intentionally go out of one's comfort zone and to encounter and engage somebody that you're pretty sure doesn't agree with you. To have a friendly conversation with a person. And it doesn't mean, and I don't mean an argument, and I don't mean, staying up to 4 a.m. I mean, simply a very human conversation where you meet not as opposing positions, but as persons with families, with children, grandchildren, jobs. Look, maybe the same faith, maybe not the same faith, but look for what's common to try and to get used to doing that. I think that's a good place to start.
Absolutely. And then 2 questions we ask each of our guests. What fills your heart about the church today, and what breaks your heart about the church?
Well, what breaks my heart is this, and any of my pre-secretaries will tell you this. When we're driving, there's a certain road in Baltimore, I won't tell you which one it is, and they're building like crazy. And I don't see any evidence that we're penetrating into those condos and apartment buildings and this new construction. And it's people are moving in there who need to hear from us. What breaks my heart is how many people we don't reach, who I think if they were invited would give us a look or two. What makes me happy is the 2,000 people who came into church at Easter. My gosh, I had 39 at the cathedral. It was like the River Jordan. It was terrific. And I was so happy to see these mostly young people coming into the church. You see it in campus ministry. You see it in my downtown parishes. The oldest cathedral in the United States is one of my youngest parishes. On Sunday, this past Sunday, it was packed with 20-something, 30-something-year-olds. That makes me really happy.
Yeah, good reason for hope.
Absolutely.
And then finally, Archbishop, some quick answer questions. We talked about the Communion Project and the getting together and building fraternity, like you've been talking about, in friendship. I love the parish potluck as a great way to do that over food. What's your go-to dish, either to bring to a parish potluck or to eat at a parish potluck?
Well, if I bring a dish to a potluck, it would be called pot unlucky. I am a terrible cook. Gosh, I mean, cereal, maybe cereal. So you don't want that. If someone brings a great dessert, like English trifle, as long as the cream's good, I am all in. I am all in. If someone brings red velvet cake, all in.
That's great. In your pastoral letter, you mentioned the witness of all these saints, which we talked about, which are great signs of hope. What patron saint do we need today in our country to build communion?
Oh gosh, it's to pick one is kind of hard. Obviously, I already expressed my deep devotion and love for Blessed Michael McGivney. But in many ways, I look at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, and she did it all. A wife, a mother. She found the fullness of the faith. She made the big sacrifice to do that. She cared for her husband, William, as he was dying of tuberculosis in Italy, no less. Came back, obviously searching, obviously looking, as I mentioned earlier, becomes a Catholic, but that's not enough. She starts a school here in Baltimore, and she was confirmed by John Carroll, by the way, and then founds a religious community that does an immense amount of education and healthcare. There is a life that embraces all of the opportunity that this wide land offered the Catholic Church. And she went from being a socialite to being kind of disenfranchised to being always a faithful mother, but the foundress of a tremendous religious congregation. So I see her as someone who kind of embodies what was and is possible for the church in our country. And I think maybe no one person is doing all of that these days, but all of us can do a bit of what she did.
Absolutely. And then finally, what's one thing you would want someone who's curious about the Catholic Church to know?
I'd want them to know that if you enter into the church, they would discover who they are in the eyes of God, that Jesus Christ would reveal them to themselves, that they would have a beautiful discovery of their human dignity, their high calling to friendship with God, and that they would answer that call in communion with those around them.
Well, Archbishop, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time together in the fulsome conversation.
Jonathan, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining today's conversation. The Communion Project is an initiative of the Paulist Fathers. Be sure to visit our ever-growing resource library at communionproject.org to explore videos, articles, parish resources, and prayers for building unity and communion in our church. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, become what you receive.